Hello, everyone. It's July 30th and it's 5 o'clock, and this is for the short term rentals community workshop. We're just going to give a few minutes for everyone to still log in, and we'll begin in a few minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first of two online community workshops for short term rentals. The purpose of hosting this online is to balance the health risk associated with COVID 19 while appreciating the public's input in a transparent and open manner during this current state of emergency. The public will not be able to physically attend the workshop. As a result, the city is hosting this online workshop as an opportunity for people to provide comments, feedback, and/or questions. Other alternative means of communication and feedback are also being considered to solicit additional input in the near future. My name is Karen Pan, and I'll be hosting this workshop with my colleague Nick Brandt. We also have additional staff here in our workshop. We have Ron Takaguchi, who is our building official, as well as Carol Ann Coates, who is our building administration manager. We greatly appreciate your time and your commitment to serve your community, especially during the current situation. All of us, we work in the community development department, and while we are tasked to design a proposed regulations for short-term rentals, our main goal is to work together with all of you to ensure that we are building a safe, beautiful, and thriving community in Burbank. Before we begin, we want to see if there are any language services that are needed. We offer Spanish and Armenian for this workshop. If you would like us to translate each slide in one of these languages, please click on the icon below your computer or your phone. And we'll give you 1 minute to respond. If there are no language services that are needed, we'll continue the entire workshop in English. Maciel, who's on the line, can you please help me translate in Spanish? Okay. While we wait for Maciel to log in, Greg are you available? Can you please help me translate this slide? Greg,
Hello. Yes, hello. Մինչև մենք սկսենք, մենք ուզում ենք տեսնենք, եթե թարգմանության կարիք կա, մենք հայերեն կարող ենք թարգմանենք այս հանդիպումը, եթե դուք ուզում եք, որ մենք թարգմանենք հայերեն կամ իսպաներեն, խնդրում ենք ձեռը սեղմեք ձեր էկրանի վրա կամ ձեր հեռախոսի վրա։ Մեկ րոպե սպասենք, մինչև դուք պատասխանեք։ Եթե թարգմանություն պետք չի, մենք ամբողջ այսօրվա հանդիպումը կշարունակենք անգլերենով։ Շնորհակալություն։
Okay. If anyone needs Spanish, please also click on the raise hand icon and let us know, and we'll give you a few more seconds.
I can do Spanish as well.
Okay. Thank you, Greg.
Antes que comienza esta cosa, queremos ver si tenemos que traducir para ustedes. Si ustedes necesitan que traduzcamos, por favor, pulse la mano en su computadora. Muchas gracias y esperamos un minuto para que contesten.
Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds to double check if anyone needs Spanish or Armenian. Okay, we'll continue the workshop in English only. This is our first online community workshop, so please bear with us if we experience any technical difficulties. Tonight's workshop, which includes a presentation by staff, as well as a period for questions and answers with participants, is scheduled for 1 hour and a half. Tonight's presentation is also live on our YouTube through our City of Burbank channel. It will also be recorded and rebroadcasted on the city's TV channel. We also anticipate to hold future workshops and community meetings online. As noted, you will have an opportunity to share your input. There is a Q&A feature on the bottom of your computer or cell phone screen. At any time during the presentation, please type your question or your comment by clicking the Q&A icon. We will do our best to respond to some of the questions during the workshop. All questions and responses that we're unable to get through during the workshop will be posted on the city's website during the following days. And that'll still continue to be at www.burbankca.gov/str. During the workshop, you will also be participating in a live poll. We will be asking questions, and you can provide us feedback immediately and confidentially. During the workshop, there will be also times where we pause to see if anyone has questions. When that time period is available, we will ask you to click on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to as many questions as we can. If there is not enough time, please make sure to provide your questions and comments in the Q&A icon. Those that are speaking will have a maximum of 3 minutes and will only be able to speak once due to the time limitations. At any time, even after this workshop, you can always contact Nick Brandt or myself. We will be providing our email address and our phone number at the end, and it'll also be available online. And then also for those that are calling in through their phone, we'll also give you an opportunity to respond as well. For tonight's agenda, we will start with an overview of why we're here and go over a few definitions. We'll then provide Then we'll move into the public input section of the meeting, which will include live polls, a public comment period, and a Q&A session if time permits. And then we'll close out with next steps. What is short-term rentals? Short-term rentals are referring to renting out a housing unit in whole or in part for 30 days or less. We are here today because over the past decade, the city has experienced a rise in short-term rental activity. Cities through the state nation have responded in different ways to short-term rentals, either by banning or creating programs to allow this type of business in their community. Currently, Burbank does not have any rules specifically addressing short-term rentals occurring in the city. Another reason why this item is being presented is in connection with the City Council's approved economic recovery plan, which is the plan to encourage development and business recovery and financial stability for our residents, thereby continuing to build a safe, beautiful, and thriving community. Regulating and allowing short-term rentals in Burbank is consistent with the sixth plan policy of the Economic Recovery Plan, which states helping Burbank's tourism industry recover by promoting and marketing our hotels, restaurants, the Hollywood Burbank Airport, and local destinations. Short-term rentals help implement this policy on two levels. First, on a macro level, short-term rentals have become a critical part of the city's tourist infrastructure. By formalizing regulations on short-term rentals, the city would effectively add accommodation and allow more visitors to stay in Burbank. On a micro scale, short-term rentals may be important to residents to improve their finances during the recovery. Many residents may want to rent out their homes to help with mortgage or rent payments, or for extra spending money. Short-term rentals may be a viable new income source. Based on staff and consultants' research, it's estimated that there are approximately 400 to 500 listings in a given year in the city with an occupancy rate of approximately 1/3. We are going to start off with our first live poll question, and Nick is going to help me enable that feature. So on your screen, whether you're on your computer or your phone, you'll be able to see a question that asks you, in Burbank, how has short-term rentals impacted you and your family? We're going to give you a few minutes to respond. You'll be able to click one of those options that are on your screen. So it's positively, somewhat positively, neutral, somewhat negatively, or negatively. And we'll give you a few seconds to respond. Okay, we have stopped our poll. Thank you so much for responding. We wanted to show you what the live poll says. And we asked this question because we wanted to get a feel for what our residents thought about short-term rentals in Burbank. And it looks like 35% of you have mentioned that it's been positively. 3% of you mentioned that it's somewhat positively. 35% of you voted neutral. 10% of you voted somewhat negatively, and 16% of you voted negatively. Thank you so much. This definitely helps us understand what the community's perspective is. Thank you. So the discussion about short-term rentals was initially presented to City Council as a study session on June 16th of this year. Alternatives were mentioned. We talked about an explicit ban for short-term rentals or to allow short-term rentals through a business license process. There were discussions about what both alternatives would look like, resources needed, and things to consider if a ban or allowing short-term rentals was the direction. And City Council provided us input on the administrative regulations and has directed staff to prepare a proposed ordinance to regulate short-term rentals, which is why we're here today. I wanted to take this moment. We gave some background information about short-term rentals, and because this is a workshop, we want to be mindful of people who might have questions or comments, and so we want to double check if there are any at this time. So if you do, please remember to click the raised hand icon and we'll call your name. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes to ask your question or share your comment total. And you'll have an opportunity to speak. If there are no questions, then we'll continue with the workshop and we'll give you a minute to raise your hand.
Okay, David, Aaron. We have 3 questions. David, Aaron, you are now allowed to talk, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi. I typed a question saying that the presenter said that there is no current ordinance for short-term rentals. That's confusing to me because I received a letter from the city clerk's office 4 years ago saying that Airbnbs were banned in the city of Burbank.
Okay, I'm happy to clarify that. So what we mean by there is no short-term rental ordinance, when we say that, we mean that there is nothing in the Burbank Municipal Code that specifically addresses short-term rentals. You are correct that they are banned. However, that is due to hotels not being a permitted use in any residential areas.
Well, I think it's disingenuous to say that there's no current ordinance covering short-term rentals when in fact Airbnbs are not hotels.
And David, you bring up a good point. What we can do is we could clarify that language with you, what is in the current ordinance that talks about how hotels are in residential areas in our zoning code. And if you don't mind, we can get your contact information and we'll make sure to show you that piece and clarify what's being presented versus what's in the ordinance.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Okay, Lori Trapp, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Kind of the same. I think you just answered the question because it's the same situation for me. Is that I was had my home Airbnb for a few years, and it was probably about a year and a half ago. I got a letter, an email stating that one of the neighbors had said I was doing short-term rentals. But I should back up to say, I kept checking with the city. Hey, is there anything preventing me from doing this? And nobody could answer that question, or actually they said that there wasn't anything stating that I couldn't rent my home. So I had been renting it, and then I got this email saying you can't do this short term, and I had to send an email back committing, or a letter committing to not rent it for less than 30 days. So that's what I'd been adhering to. So I was very confused too to hear you say there's no current ordinance saying or preventing that. So.
Okay, Lori, we'll also work with you as well on the language that is currently in the code versus the presentation tonight as well.
Okay. please excuse me. Please excuse my pronunciation. Brijesh or B. Rajesh, you are now allowed to talk. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, this is Brijesh, and hello everyone. I am kind of uh, fairly new to the community. I've been here for about 2.5, 3 years, and we have one neighbor, and we did try to find out because they were doing some short-term rental, and I wanted to more information around what are the policies. So I would like to be included in that communication that you guys are sending to the previous two people, and that would probably answer my question.
Okay, definitely. We'll make sure to get your contact information to clarify what we mean. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nick, are there any questions through the Q&A, or is there anyone else that is raising their hand that wants to speak? Okay, it looks like we do have a number of raised hands, and I apologize. We're going to continue with the presentation. Because you aren't able to ask your question or provide your comment at this period of the workshop, go ahead and continue to submit your question or your comment through the Q&A feature, and we'll make sure to respond. Sorry about that. The next part for the workshop is that we want to ask you policy questions about short-term rentals. Before I go into that, I want to mention that there are two types of short-term rentals. The first is home sharing. This is where a room is rented out. The unit's owner is typically present during this transaction. While this is a type of short-term rental, we do want to highlight that City Council recently adopted an ordinance in February 2020 to not allow ADUs or accessory dwelling units to participate in short-term rentals. However, other rooms within a home is an option for short-term rentals. The second category of short-term rental is a vacation rental. This is where the entire unit is rented out to guests with the owner absent. These are common in tourist destinations, including those communities that have beach houses or mountain cabins. We have another live poll question to ask all of you. There are cities that allow or do not allow vacation rentals, meaning renting out their whole house. What is your perspective on vacation rentals? You'll have 3 options to choose from. The first one is vacation rentals should not be allowed. The second one is vacation rentals should be allowed, but restricted with number of days per year. And the third option is vacation rentals should not be allowed. And we're going to have the live polling now. We'll give you a few seconds to respond.
Okay, the poll is now closed, and these are the results. The first option, vacation rentals should be allowed, has 16 votes for 48% of the vote. The second option, vacation rentals should be allowed, but restrict the number of days per year, had 8 votes or 24% of the vote. And then rounding out the last of the 3 options, vacation rentals should not be allowed, had 9 votes and came in at 27%.
Thank you, everyone, for voting. Our next live poll question for you is regarding owner occupancy. Owner occupancy is defined as someone who lives on a property or on a unit of a property. Some cities have either no restriction or some restriction on owner occupancy. Do you think the owner should be required to be on the property for their short-term rental listing? You'll have two options to choose from. Yes, the owner should be living on their property and renting their property in whole or in part. Or the second option is no, the owner does not need to live in their rental property. And we'll give you a few minutes to respond.
Okay, I've just closed the poll. Here are our answers. Yes, the owner should be living on the property, and renting their property in whole or in part had 17 votes and got 50% of the vote. And then the second option, no, the owner does not need to live in their rental property for their short-term rental, got the same number of votes, 17 for another 50%.
Nick, can you share
Oh,
the results? Thank you. So it's a 50-50. Thank you, Nick. We'll move on to our last live poll question. This question is, if someone owns more than one residential property, should someone be allowed to use their additional residential properties as a short-term rental? Yes or no? And we'll give you a few seconds to respond to that one as well.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll, and here are our results. Yes, someone who owns more than one residential property should be allowed to use their additional residential properties as a short-term rental. Got 21 votes for 60% of the vote. And then no, someone with more than one residential property should not be allowed to use their additional residential properties as a short-term rental. Got 14 votes for 40% of the vote. And I'll share the results. My apologies. And there you have it.
Thank you for your feedback on these policy questions. While we work on proposed ordinance and administrative regulations, we're going to take into consideration the results of these live polls as well as the questions that we get. Moving on from the live polling questions, we want to take another opportunity for people to ask any questions or have any comments. Please remember to raise your hand with the icon, and Nick will call you. And you'll have 3 minutes to talk. And if you've already talked, if you don't mind, we would like others to have an opportunity to speak.
Okay. we're going to go in the same order that we're going to let the people who raised their hands earlier talk first, and then I'll try to grab people in the order that they raised their hand. The first person to talk will be Constantine Anthony. Constantine Anthony, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for putting this together. Just real quick, is there any way to add another live poll question, or is it too late for you guys to do that? Because I'd like to see how many of the respondents who are voting in these questions, how many of them are landlords, how many of them are paying the transient occupancy tax on their short-term rentals, and then how many folks are renters and people looking for housing, because that's a huge component of this is removing units off the market. A full size vacation rental, it removes a unit from the market, and that's a real problem here in Southern California. I personally don't have a problem with renting out your room. I think you don't want a permanent roommate. You don't need to have that extra space made available to anyone all throughout the year. But a short-term rental for a small income for a family who's just struggling and trying to get by, I think would be a great use of an extra bedroom. Banning it from the ADUs, I think, is a smart idea, because that's kind of a whole unit on its own. But yeah, renting out your own spare room, I'm all in favor of that. That's what Airbnb was originally for. It was couch surfing. It was spare bedroom use. It was small income, side income for people who actually work all the time. And having the owner on site, it prevents a lot of the issues we see with Airbnb, late night house parties, devastation to the surrounding neighborhood, people ruining houses and starting fires or parking illegally. I'd just like to see that if you could possibly do another poll at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Constantine. Unfortunately, we cannot add a poll midstream. It's very difficult to do so. However, we are having another community workshop in September, I believe. That we don't have an exact date scheduled for it, but be on the lookout for that additional community workshop, and those are questions that we can ask at that community workshop.
Great, thank you so much.
And I wanted to add that we understand that not everyone is able to participate in this workshop. They might have time conflicts. And so on our website, we're going to give an opportunity for people to share their input, and a survey will be released after this workshop so people can provide that feedback. And
That's great.
we'll include that. Thank you.
Okay, Erica Benitez, you now have 3 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon. I actually want just a little bit of clarification. So I'm a little confused as to what is accepted currently for short-term rentals. Just a little background. We have a tenant in the property that I live who has rented the unit for about 2 years, specifically to just rent it out. She has never lived here. And so the rest of the neighbors are being negatively impacted. We have people coming in all the time. Packages are being stolen. Our landlord has closed off the laundry room because there's too much water being used, because sometimes we'll have up to 9 people that are renting that 1-bedroom apartment. So I just want to know, is this going to tackle instances? Is this even legal currently? And if so, is what you guys are currently discussing something that's going to address situations where we have people that are just specifically renting units in the city of Burbank to just utilize as a hotel?
Erica, and I'm going to speak, but let me know if I don't answer your question. Right now, in our zoning code, we have language that specifically says that hotel type of use is not allowed in residential areas, but it doesn't specifically has language related to short-term rental with regulating it, how to operate it, do you need a business license, and due to the demand of or the use of short-term rentals in Burbank, it was brought up to council, and the direction right now is to create those proposed language for our ordinance and regulation. So short-term rentals that are happening right now are just happening right now. There's just no language that specifically speaks to it. So people are continuing to do it. Those where we have received complaints through our code enforcement staff, we try to address it and reference that zoning code that speaks to hotel type of use is not allowed in residential areas. Moving forward, we definitely want to include this information in our ordinance, and working through this workshop and our upcoming community meetings, getting feedback from the community really helps to figure out exactly what type of operation we would like to see in Burbank that makes sure that we address both sides, whether you use it or whether you like it or whether you don't like it. Does that answer your question, Erica? And if it doesn't, just let me know. I don't mind at all.
So then it sounds, I mean, it answered some of it. So then currently then, although the language is not completely there, what my neighbor is currently doing then at this point is against the city ordinance, correct? Because we have tried speaking with the property owner who assures us that what they're doing is completely legal. And like I said, there's a question of safety issues because you don't know the kind of people that are renting this unit. And then it comes to the negative impact where the rest of the tenants are now being penalized for someone using too much water in the first apartment, where our landlord or the property owner has closed up our laundry room, since obviously this unit, he pays for the water. So if this is not something that's legal, what would be then the best way of going about to address it? Because the rest of us are kind of frustrated that we're paying the same amount of money as somebody else, and they're taking away legally, I mean, essentially property use because of someone else here that's just using that unit since she's gotten it just as rental. She has never lived there. She's just renting it out. And we found the listing that she's using.
Erica, you're right on your perspective on how short-term rental is perceived. At the end of the presentation, we have our email address and phone number, and we could relay that information to our code enforcement staff. Thank you, Erica.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Anthony S., you have 3 minutes.
How's it going? So I just want to touch on a few topics right now. I happen to own 5 properties here in Burbank in which I do short-term rentals, and I've been doing them for about 3 years. I think there is a way to kind of make everyone happy. You know, I do provide parking for all of my properties. I am a super host, and in order to be a super host, they hold you to a certain degree of customer satisfaction. Are your neighbors happy? I just really think for everyone out there that's listening, that like I just heard right now, where she's very unhappy. I think that personally you should have to own the property itself, because then the liability falls on you and not the landlord, which I agree with 100%. And I just want to put it out there, the average person on vacation spends $1,200 per person, and I'm averaging about 5 people in my 3-bedroom house, and it's a daily rental situation. It's about $2,190,000 that I'm bringing to the Magnolia Park area, which, it really helps, because Magnolia Park has kind of been seen as, being gentrified and bigger companies coming in. And I feel like as a host, we could send people to, the mom and pop owned places, but it'll really boost that, the micro economy. So, I mean, I guess wanted to put it out there and make a statement on it. I think that it would be ridiculous to do just specific days, 180 days like other cities are doing, because, we are dealing with a situation where you cannot get, tenants out of a house right now, with the stay on evictions, and it puts it in a really bad position. You sit here and you're like, okay, you knew 6 months out of the year you can rent, and 6 months out of the year must be, long term. So, yeah, I guess my point that trying to get across is that we can all kind of work together and figure this out and make it beneficial for everyone. So, not much of a question, but more of a statement. So, yeah.
Thank you Anthony. Thank you so much for your perspective. We very much appreciate it. Okay, Jana Prisbieda, please forgive my pronunciation. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. Nick, I could barely hear you when you're introducing people, just so I don't know if that's just my system, but I hear everyone else speaking very well. I agree with Erica and the gentleman before. I'm not opposed to what Anthony's saying. I don't know a lot about how great he's doing for the economy or the microeconomy in Magnolia Park, but that's fine. From Erica's perspective, I understand we have one home on our residential street that we know of, because it impacts a good 8 to 10 houses almost nightly by the revolving door that is continuing to go. We've been told by code enforcement that they're not allowed to rent overnight. It shouldn't be happening. The cops come over and they go in and they come out laughing within 5 minutes and drive away. Nobody does a thing about it. And it's indiscriminate on any day of the week. It is completely intrusive, and it is breaking a lot of families into wondering if they should move, because it doesn't feel like Burbank is taking into account how much we have paid to be here as individual family units in residential neighborhoods. And someone comes up with a brainiac idea to have mini overnight hotel type situations that take up complete our street. We don't have driveways on our street. And I know Anthony said he provides parking for everyone, and that's, he sounds very conscientious, but I don't know that you can actually get that. The gentleman that owns the place across the street is a very big name in Burbank and doesn't seem to give a care about any of us that have lived here. I've lived here for almost 40 years, and it's really a problem. And the super spreader situation that could have been, there have been on average these overnight parties, like they're renting it for parties, and they come in droves of like 30 people, and they're in the house. It's not that big of a house. They're out in the backyard, they're screaming, they're yucking it up, and our neighbors are like, we have to work. What is happening here? And it's just not fair. They're not taking into account the people that have paid really good money to buy their homes in Burbank and be here and raise their families. It's changing. It's just, this explicit ban is that you talked about is non-existent so far. So I really hope there'll be some enforcement created. And going to that question, when will language be created, and can there be some sort of emergency language that could be posted? Because these people are breaking rules every day. And I'm not speaking about Anthony. He sounds great, but others that aren't Anthony are not. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. And thank you for letting me know that my microphone is not loud enough.
Thanks.
In terms of a schedule, we'll get to that a little bit later in our presentation, but a quick preview, we expect to have a draft ordinance in front of the City Council in December, and prior to that, a draft ordinance in front of the Planning Board in November of this year. Okay, David Aaron, you now have 3 minutes.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it sounds from your responses that you're not aware that the city has been contacting people doing Airbnb and short-term rentals and telling them to shut down because they're violating the ordinance. Is that correct?
No, we are aware of that. However, as we understand it, there are not very many occurrences of this. And
I was told by the city clerk that the only time they pursue it is if a neighbor complains, that they didn't have the staff resources, because I brought up the fact that there are hundreds, like 300 to 500 at any day, listed on Airbnb. And she said they only pursue it if it is a complaint by a neighbor. But the letter that I received and the subsequent phone call specifically mentioned short-term rentals like Airbnb were not allowed. So I really just want to understand. You said you're going to share language later, but I just want to make sure we're kind of on the same page with what's happened in the past and what you're trying to do moving forward.
Okay, I'm going to let Ron Takaguchi, he is the building and safety inspector and for the city. I'm going to let him handle this question. Ron, you are now permitted to talk.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So regarding enforcement, one of the things that we're going to look at in providing the ordinance are the vehicles for enforcement, together with the if we do allow short-term rentals. As we have it now, the city is reactive. Only when a complaint is filed do we then do an investigation. Investigation is a little harder without a registry. One of the things that we're considering in drafting the ordinance is business license, as was mentioned, which will allow us to see those that are legally registered with the city as a short-term rental. So we would know what their frequency of rentals is, and if they are in compliance with the city's regulations. Right now, it's I hate to use this word, but free-for-all. Without regulation, there is no input, and we do appreciate citizens, those that are for, those that are concerned about short-term rentals. That is the best way to write an ordinance and provide enforcement. So we look forward to your input.
Well, I think the thing that concerns me is that, 4 years ago, I was contacted by the city saying that this is illegal. And I'm hearing 4 years later that this is still ongoing and that somehow just now you're trying to create a better legal language. So it just kind of, it doesn't feel good that I had to shut down and yet there are hundreds every day.
And with the city's look at this, we want everyone to be in compliance. We felt that there's a need just for the need of housing, and those that are doing this who may not have been aware that this is not allowed in Burbank, that we could have the best program for those that provide the need for housing or short-term stays, and doing so in a legal manner. So we do appreciate that you have been working with the city. And it seems like you, by being on this call, you want to do it in the right manner. So, with your further input, we hope to get the best possible policy coming up.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, David. We appreciate your input. Okay, Justin Worsham, you now have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just have a quick question that I don't know if you guys have the answer. That to me might have a bigger impact on like a short-term rental. Is there any kind of like Megan's Law disclosure that's required for anybody that is coming in and out of these houses that you guys are aware? If not, that might be another thing that I imagine residents would want to be a part of any ordinance moving forward. Thank you.
Hi, Justin. Thank you for your question. At this point, we're not aware of any statute that has similar languages as to Megan's Law. Based on our research looking at various cities in Southern California, each city has handled it very differently. Sometimes that information, just the name of who is hosting the short-term rental could be posted online, and some of them don't. It has varied, but we're at this point not familiar if there are any state statute regarding releasing such information like Megan's Law. But that's definitely something we are considering at looking and adding language to our proposed ordinance.
Okay, Justin, if that's it, I'm gonna take you off.
And maybe during this time, I'll also clarify for those that are on the line that might not be familiar with Megan's Law. Megan's Law is a legislation that states that if you have such a type of criminal record related to minors, that information is public information, and there is an online portal for anyone to look up their zip code or their address to see if there are any type of specific activities related to Megan's Law for minors. And that information, it usually includes a picture of that person as well as their name and possibly an address related to someone who has violated a law. Thank you for your question, Justin.
Okay, Lily Zabat, you now have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me? I think so.
Yep.
I don't sound like a Lily. My name's Danny Rude. I'm a 20-year resident of Burbank. And I represent a national property management company for specifically vacation rentals and short-term rentals. And while I don't operate in the city of Burbank because they have no language, so I just won't operate in this city, I can tell you the positives from short-term and vacation rentals that we've experienced in LA is you just don't have the kind of problems you did even a year ago with regulation. A lot of the problems come from mismanagement and the lack of language and regulation that holds owners and hosts to account. In regards to the tenants and guests that I have in my properties in Los Angeles, I often know more about the guests visiting than I know about my neighbors. And that's just my point. Like, I feel like this is a big part of the future of housing. And every guest is held to account as long as they have an account on any one of the platforms. So, I deal with a lot of the data, so I see all this in real time. So I'm a proponent of, common sense, real regulation that limits a lot of the problems.
Okay, thank you, Danny. You bring up a good point, and that is that one of the reasons that we are moving forward with developing regulations is to provide regulatory certainty for hosts, for renters, and for the city, so that they all know what the playing field is for short-term rentals. So thank you so much for your input, and we really appreciate it.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, Tamala Takahashi, you are now permitted to talk. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of questions. For the short-term rental listings that are up in Big Bear and out in Redlands, they have requirements for their listings of noise ordinance requirements, like you can only have noise to a certain time at night, max occupancy limits, and parking limits. Are these going to be considered either in this ordinance as part of the ordinance itself, or potentially as a separate ordinance to pair up with that? That's my first question. The second thing is regarding enforcement. Is there going to be, with like for the listings that are on Airbnb and other short-term rental online listings, is there going to be a requirement through them that in order to list your rental, you have to put your permit number or somehow do some sort of pre-screening so that it's more difficult for unlicensed rentals to have a listing on these sites?
Thank you for those questions. Both of those are things that we are considering. We are considering including a posting that we are considering that. How should I say this? We are considering that hosts post the Burbank City noise requirements, that we were looking into different occupancy levels. We're looking into parking regulations, and we are also considering requiring that hosts post their permit number in their listing. These are all things that are very common in the regulations for all the surrounding cities, and we imagine that they will be present in our ordinance as well.
And Tamala, all the components that you mentioned, we are definitely considering, just like what Nick mentioned. With each of those components, we have seen various cities handle it a little bit differently depending if they're in a coastal area or if their community is mostly driven by tourism. And we have seen variations of it. But definitely we are going to take into consideration all those components.
All right, Jay Santos, you now have 3 minutes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, I wanted to know what are we drafting in the ordinance in regards to people that own ADUs or live in a duplex and where the residents, the primary residence, the owner lives in the primary residence and is able to rent out the back unit, complying to all the laws. That was my first question. And then my second is, it is very, my second statement was, it is very review driven. So the bad apples do eventually get weeded out in the Airbnb platform.
Jay, I'm going to respond to your question with a definitive answer about owner occupancy and how it works, whether someone can rent out their specific unit in their house or an ADU. That part is still in the process of the works of drafting out our ordinance and administrative regulations. But recently, when we had new state legislation regarding accessory dwelling units just in general, back in February, we did adopt an ordinance that says that ADUs or accessory dwelling units are prohibited from participating in short-term rentals. Does that answer your question? I just want to make sure that I do. But right now with like duplexes, which unit can be rented out, whether it's in part or in whole, that's going to be part of this process. And any input that you have regarding or your perspective of one way or the other, that's the feedback that we're looking for today.
Got it. Yeah, I understand that it is not allowed at the moment, but when the owner is on the premises, it does put in additional coverage in the sense that no parties are able to happen, or at least the owner has better control of the situation.
Okay. Thank you for that feedback, Jay. And while Nick looks for another speaker, but please feel free if there are any comments about your perspective on short-term rentals or what you would like to see in the administrative regulation or the ordinance, this will be a great opportunity for you to share that input as well. Thank you.
Okay, David Aaron, you have 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit it by mistake. I'm all set.
Okay, thank you. All right, Cam Singh, you now have 3 minutes. Cam, you're on mute.
Aha, there we go. Hi. I said all of my brilliant things right then. Thank you guys for doing this. I've been a resident of Burbank my whole life. I've traveled around. I've stayed in Airbnbs. I've been given permission by different owners and landlords throughout the years since Airbnb started in 2010 to rent out my places, but with written permission. I'm an owner in a couple of different states and cities as well. And I do believe that a lot of the difficulty happens when renters sublet their spaces. So a renter can take a lease on a couple of different homes. And I believe the gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but gentleman who has the brokerage company, the management company for the Airbnbs or for short-term rentals can kind of address this as well. But a lot of times what a renter will do is they will they'll take a lease on various homes or apartments, and then they will re-rent them as a business. And sometimes those renters will then sublet out as well. And that's when I've always seen the real issues. So I think that there needs to be stipulations on who is allowed to rent, whether it is the owner or if you guys are going to allow subletting out of a rental, because that's usually just for profit, just for somebody else to go on vacation or for them to start a business. And if they're going to have a business like that, then they need to have a business license. And I do agree 100% with noise ordinances and permission from your neighbors. If your neighbors are not in agreement or you have violated a certain amount of times with the rules that are being put in place by what we're doing here, then you should not be allowed to continue to rent. I also believe that there should be guest regulations based on beds. So if you have a twin size bed and you could put 2 people in that bed, you can't have 4 people in that space. If that's all you have, that's all you have. I think that those types of regulations from the owners and from Burbank City can really alleviate some of the issues. I've had both long-term and short-term rentals in my properties. I've had more issues with my long-term tenants than I've ever had with short-term tenants. One time did I have somebody rent it for a birthday party that they lied about. I was living on the premises at the time, and I had to call the police in order to get them out. And that was a horrific experience. But without regulations and without ordinances, that's what we are going to continue to face. So that's what I got.
Okay, thank you so much for your input. I can answer a couple of those questions. Guest regulations in terms of in terms of occupancy, that's something that we are looking at for our regulation. For our regulations, for example, some cities have stipulations that if you have 1 bedroom, there can't be more than 2 adults sleeping in that bedroom. If you have 2 bedrooms. You can't have more than 4 adults sleeping in those 2 bedrooms. That's the type of regulation that we're looking at for our ordinance. With regards to lessors or people who renting out their units on the short-term rental market, that's also something that we're investigating. If we were to allow it, we would only allow it with the permission of the landlord, and we would request written permission for that to happen. And lastly, with regards to permit or business license or permits to operate, we would require everyone who is renting out their units on the short-term rental market to obtain a business license before they started doing this.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
With regards to the gentleman with the adorable dog that's all masked up, with regards to the ADUs and second, I know that right now the law in Burbank states that that you have to be an owner occupied and you can only rent the main unit, but sometimes it can be more advantageous for both. Let's say you have a larger family, or a smaller family, but you have an open space, to rent a 3-4 bedroom house to one person, and you're allowing them to have a place to live, whether it's right now in COVID when there's first responders that are needing homes, and having to, give up 3 of your bedrooms for one person as opposed to renting out a smaller unit, say it's a 1 or 2 bedroom. I feel like there shouldn't be a stipulation put on how you're allowed to rent, which unit you're allowed to rent. I don't think you should rent out everything, but if you're living on it, why wouldn't you you use your own discretion on which you're able to help out other families?
Okay, great. Thank you for your input. We very much appreciate it. All right, Lori Trapp, you are now able to talk. You have 3 minutes.
Hello again. So I've been, my husband and I went through the process before it was called an ADU. Before it was called an additional dwelling unit, it was called a second dwelling, and we went through the process of getting a permit, and it took probably 4 years. And this was about 4 years ago. So it was a long process. And so we started using Airbnb about, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. We were doing this a long time ago before people even knew what it was. And so I have definitely seen the changes, and I love staying in Airbnbs because it's just whenever we travel, I like to be in Airbnbs because it's a unique opportunity to, it's the flavor of the community. You get to stay in unique places. I don't want to stay in a hotel anymore. I rarely do it. And because of the way that California has now, our governor has allowed all additional dwelling units everywhere, and we've lost a lot of control of how these are built and regulated. This is a new issue where it's being built. ADUs are being built everywhere. I see it happening. And so I appreciate you guys looking into this. And just to say, I can't stand it when communities are no longer allowing it, because I think it's a disservice to the community. And I believe that there needs to be regulation. But what I don't want to see is Burbank taxing. I don't want occupancy taxes. It's I don't know. There's just something about it. Like, we're already paying taxes, and that's one thing that I don't like when I go somewhere and I'm paying occupancy taxes. What else about it? I just, so for us, it's a unique perspective too, because I spoke earlier we are not, we don't do short-term rentals. We only do long-term. And the other thing you should know is I'm a 25-year resident. All my neighbors have been there for years. We're respectful of our neighbors. We're respectful of the parking. I don't do the instant booking because you don't know who's going to be there. Like, we care a lot. I have a lot of dialogue with people who are coming to stay in my house, and they're all long term. And so the only thing I have is the only question that I would have too is that we stay in our not additional dwelling unit, but second dwelling, because that's what it used to be called. And we rent our main property and we're long term. So that is not what we're talking about, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Good. Okay. And I appreciate you guys having this dialogue.
And we also want to make clear, we appreciate all the input that we're getting from everybody. This is extremely helpful in our quest to develop regulations that as many people like as possible.
Oh, and one more thing, like the other thing that I always have a difficult time with is when policies are changed for the bad situations, like the situations where there's renters having parties, because when I travel, I always look for private owners who own their homes because I know that they care about their neighbors and they're going to give a unique, a unique perspective. And the corporations that are coming in and buying properties like Nashville, because that's been exploding in short-term rentals, that's a totally different thing. And I would like to be able to choose where I stay and choose who gets to stay in my home because I care about my neighborhood. So I would rather policies not be written for the bad eggs, like people that are partying and don't know who's staying in their house, because it's not fair to people like me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Lori. We really appreciate your input. All right, Anthony, you are now permitted to talk. You've got 3 minutes.
How's it going? Sorry, me again. I just wanted to touch base on what Cam, I believe is what Cam, I believe. I don't know. Anyway, she was mentioning, policies where there's 3-strike policy and whatnot. And one thing I wanted to see if you guys, it's really hard when you go based on neighbor situations because there's neighborhoods that are very tight knit groups. And if anyone kind of moves in, all of a sudden you get the side eye. They're known as the Karens, now in the cancel culture that we have going on. And I do have a situation currently where I have a short-term rental where if someone comes in and they're just talking in the backyard, the cops are called. And it just so happens that it always happens when there are Black guests. So clearly there's some kind of race issue going on. And, the cops get there and, going back to a conversation that I think is the second person that spoke where they said the cops come out laughing. I had a similar situation to that as well when the cops came up and they were legitimately laughing like, well, I met the police there and they say, oh, well, you know what? People are just talking and, you're just going to have complaints from neighbors all the time. I want to make sure that, there is actual monitoring, of something that's happening that's wrong. We can't just take there's 3 sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth. You know what I mean? I'm going to say one thing, the neighbor's going to say the other thing. There has to be someone in the middle because I agree that you shouldn't allow parties or situations like that. But it's all situational where one person's party is another person's 6 people talking loudly. So I just wanted to make sure that that's also something that, we'd bring up to make sure that in Palm Springs, there is actually a committee that will go out there with a decibel meter to the front yard. And if it hits a certain decibel, that is when you will be ticketed. You know what I mean? And then they're on a 3-strike basis. So it's like first strike warning, second strike, you get a fine, third strike, you're out for the next 30, 60, or 90 days. I think that's reasonable and can kind of meet both sides of the fence as well. And, I just wanted to say that Airbnb has they're very customized and you can pretty much break down charge per person, charge per day, charge per night, charge for anything. You could break it down. I think people need to learn how to customize it to avoid parties and to avoid situations like that. So yeah, I just again wanted to put all that out there and see what your guys' thoughts were on it. So that was a lot.
Thank you so much, Anthony. In regards to, I think you were kind of alluding to this, but one of the facets of our regulations will be enforcement of the regulations that we develop, whether that includes warning plus administrative citations plus revocation of permits or suspension of permits is yet to be determined, but it is something that we will be looking at, and we thank you for your input.
Cool. Thank you.
Nick, how many more people would like to speak?
We just have one more raised hand, and that is Cindy. Cindy, you are now allowed to talk. You've got 3 minutes. Cindy, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Jesus Christ.
We can hear you.
Hello?
Hi, Cindy. We can hear you.
Oh, good. Sorry, I was listening on my phone and switched to my computer audio. But anyway, thank you so much for hosting this and getting our soliciting our feedback. I wanted to say, like, conceptually, I'm not opposed to short-term rentals, but practically speaking, my husband and I have had a very bad experience living next door to one in the Hillside district. Like, we moved into our place like 17 years ago. We like someone said earlier, we paid extra for the nice, quiet suburban lifestyle. And our longtime next door neighbor sold their house to someone who ended up like turning it into a rental property. And there's just been this constant stream of people coming and going from that property. What I think is happening is I think what Cam was saying earlier, I think there's like some main tenants who then Airbnb like bedrooms in the house to others. So at any one, like I see the main people staying there, but then at any one point in time, there's like these other strangers coming and going and taking up parking. And last summer, like seriously, every Saturday there was some like loud random party like right next door to our backyard. So it was really invading like our privacy, our peace and quiet. And it's been horrible. So I think and yeah, we're also concerned about safety and all these strangers coming and going, like, maybe checking out our property, like to see what valuables we may have available. So it's just been very disconcerting. And I think a lot of these regulations that have been proposed would help curb a lot of this bad behavior, but it's just really been a nightmare. And I feel like it's really devalued our property having this experience right next door. I like the idea of noise ordinances, of parking ordinances, of the owner, like not allowing tenants to then sublet as short-term rentals. I think that would be very helpful. Like the party situation also needs to be controlled somehow, like just to avoid this type of situation right next door. Oh, and also I wanted to ask, are you considering possibly varying the regulations depending on the like density of the area of the city? Like maybe the Hillside district that's less dense would have more stringent regulations than denser areas where there's already a lot of activity and people coming and going.
Thank you, Cindy, for your feedback and your question. If you want to provide us more information about what's going on in your neighborhood, definitely send us an email and we could take a look at it on our end. Regard to your question about if we're going to propose any ordinance or regulation, depending on different areas of Burbank and districts such as the Hillside or the Media District. At this point, we are not looking at specific language based on area. Right now, we're considering a citywide one.
Okay, well, just because we've had this terrible experience, I'll be definitely stay involved and continue to monitor the proposals that you put forward, because what's going on right now isn't regulated enough, and it's a detriment to our lifestyle and our investment in Burbank.
I see. Thank you, Cindy.
Sure.
Cindy was our last caller, and thank you so much again for providing your feedback, comments, and questions. We're going to move forward with our last slide, and it's regarding our next steps. This is our first community workshop for short-term rentals. We definitely want to have a second one. The second workshop, we're aiming for fall 2020. Nick earlier mentioned that we're looking at September of this year, and we're hoping that at that point we'll provide more definitive proposed responses to everyone's question. So that'll be coming up. With that, we are looking at a draft proposed ordinance, and we're going to be working with hosting platforms on detailed information that our community has mentioned, such as posting a business license number or permit number on their websites just to confirm that they have a license with the city for short-term rentals. Once that part is complete, we're going to move forward and present this information to Planning Board as well as our City Council, and that'll happen at the end of 2020. We definitely have more questions through our Q&A icon, and we also got emails from you during the workshop. Thank you so much. And because we haven't answered all the questions, we'll make sure to post it on our website. The website that we're posting it on is www.burbankca.gov/str. Due to the number of questions, it might take us about a week or two to post information. For those that are unable to attend the workshop and still would like to continue to provide feedback, at that time we're also going to release a survey to get information about policy questions and your perspective on this. This concludes our workshop for today, but continue to still contact Nick and myself. Our email and direct phone numbers are on the screen right now, and we'll make sure to have this information online. And this recording will be posted on our local TV channel as well, and the recording will also be posted on our website. Thank you so much for attending our first one. Luckily, we didn't have too many technical difficulties, and we appreciate your input, and have a good night. Thank you.